So we are going to start applying on top of this master pattern the lining. Now, as with everything we've kind of been doing, we need to look at the front separately. We'll do that on the half scale pattern. It is possible to draft this on here, but I just want to bring it off onto another piece of paper so that we can understand it more. But I will draw it on later onto this so we can see. Now I've done something here where I've cut the pattern and I've cut it so that we can use the fold on the facing, but please don't do this because we wouldn't do it on a real master pattern. Do you know what's interesting there? You can see where that's not been quite properly reflected there, and there's a little bit of a gap. So if you're paid per pattern in your pattern cutting life, you probably wouldn't be getting paid very much for that when it doesn't work in the factory. So these pieces all fold up. Something to bear in mind. I think, you know what, I think we can put the lining on here. So we will start with all of these points around here, and these measurements can vary and they depend on many things, but that is something that we've discussed in another video. But just because we're working at such scale, these are just going to be guidance. So at this point here is going to be our first point, and we are going to come up and out 1 centimetre, could be 1.5. Some people do 0.5, but for a garment like this with padding, lining, eased in, set in sleeves, it's good to have a little bit more. And then these notches come into their own here because we're going to come out, again, that would be about 1 centimetre in real scale, 1 centimetre under at this point, and then when we get to this point, we're going to do the same as up here, which is out 1, up 1. Yeah, so we're beginning to build a bit of a dot to dot. Now, up at this point, we might angle the lining back in, or we might bring it up 1 exactly. If you look in different examples, some people add pleats in here, and the pleat goes across the pattern. In the Winifred Aldridge bit, you will find that this pattern comes up much taller, and that's not because it's too long, it's because there's a pleat placed into it. But for this, we will just bring it to that point for today. So then what we do is we use this point, 1 centimetre, 1 centimetre, and where we get to the bottom here, so 1 centimetre, 1 centimetre, let's just cut this, facing out so we can see. When we get to here, we will want to bring it so that it's coming halfway up. So if this is 4 centimetres, this would be 2. I've brought the lining down here and kept it at 1 centimetre wider. Some people, including myself actually, I tend to grade my lining into the waist. So we'll probably do that actually because that's the way I like it. So going here, we're going to repeat this process, which is to come up and out 1. Here, up 1. Here, up 1. and out one, and this notch, one, this notch, one, and then we'll keep this going into the waist. So one here and one here. We won't worry about this notch. And again, we will be coming halfway through the facing. So when this is sewn, we can look at that on the other pattern. When this is sewn, you will see that you're not coming down to the end, but you're also not matching up here. What we're adding in here is a little pleat that runs along the bottom, and that's really good for movement, but it's also good for spread, the movement of the self fabric over time. So as you can guess, here from this point, out one, up one and out one, here out one, here out one and up one. If you're wondering, I'm taking the angle of the seam up and out, and then here on the neckline we are going to bring it into into 0. We're going to keep that so that we are doing something similar to the front. So firstly, let's just draw in that piece there, so you can see that. And we're going to do the same here. If we were using that facing, we would bring the pattern down there, but we're going to go along the back. And then we're going to come along here, like that. So we're not going to extend it up here. And then on the side, out one, and we won't go low, but we'll do the same on the bottom. So we've got that. I'm not going to say very much now, but I think you can guess what's going on here at this notch. So the width there in real scale would be about 2.5. And what that is a pleat for the back. So when you look in the back of a jacket, it's common to see a pleat. And then roughly where the waist is, maybe 1 centimetre out, and grade that line back in. So what I'm going to do is do dot to dot and join these pieces up. This should really be done with a pattern master or ruler. So we're kind of keeping about 1 centimetre bigger there, all the way around, down the side seam, and then when we get to the waistline, waist notch, we'll just grade that in. Now, the slightly tricky thing is getting this seam to match up. So in real scale, there's a difference of 2 centimetres. So this bit's 2 centimetres longer than this bit until we sew the dart. However, it's really common not to have the dart on the lining. Some do, especially in women's wear, but this is menswear. So if that's 2 centimetres longer, the good thing to do would be come in 1 centimetre and go out 1 centimetre. Something like that. So we are matching that in and grading that in. Not to blow your minds, but because we have this gap, when we come down here, that gap is about 2 centimetres as well, maybe 1 centimetre in real scale. That does mean that we have to take it off here. So we come up maybe another 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres. So that the lining comes along there. Now, how this line is finished, some people do it straight, and some people angle it into this point. It depends on the way that you're making this and sewing it. So it's common to see it like this, sometimes with a bit of a curve, and then it's common to see it like that. and that is at an angle as well, because I just brought it back down to a similar point there. There's a handout on this. I think this is probably the most confusing, difficult part of the lining for the front. But then these pieces, it's more of a dot-to-dot game. So these get joined together down here. And then when we get to the waistline, graded in, but then we share the original seam line and square across, and then we can come down here to the waistline, and then they can share the same lines. On the back, same process, dot to dot, grading into the waistline on the original side seam down to this point, square across, and then because we haven't got a vent, we are just going to come up the centre back on the original line. That leaves the back sleeve 1 centimetre up, 1 centimetre out, come 1 centimetre at the notch, 1 centimetre at the notch, 1 centimetre at the notch, 1 centimetre up, 1 centimetre out, undersleeve 1 centimetre up, 1 centimetre out, 1 centimetre up, 1 centimetre up, 1 centimetre out. And then where we get to about this measurement, this point on the notch, we will grade that line in. So at these notches we can do 1 centimetre out, 1 centimetre out, 1 centimetre out, 1 centimetre out, and then we will draw those lines in, we'll grade those lines in with care. So what we have seen is that what we're doing is we're making all of the lining pieces bigger than the shell, than the self. Sometimes people cut the lining exactly the same size, especially if it's a sportswear garment or a tech fabric. Some people sometimes actually cut the lining smaller. It really depends, but this works for suiting and tailoring. If you make it too small, then it looks like the person has kind of fallen out of a tree and their sleeves kind of pull up and stuff like that. Now, when we get to the bottom of these, we actually tend to not come down like we did here. And I'll just draw those lines in. And the reason is where we allowed for 2 extra centimetres for a pleat, we are already adding 1 centimetre and 1 centimetre into the armhole. So we should have enough. We should have enough in the sleeve to not need any extra length. I mean, if there is a problem when we're toiling or stuff, we might add that on. Okay, that's why we toil, to find out these things. So that's roughly what we're aiming for the linings. There are handouts on this, but that is the basic principle, and the lining for the front also comes down here on that line there. Some people get a bit confused and they sometimes think, is this seam allowance? And it's absolutely not. It's the lining pattern, and we need to lift those pieces off separately.